resume the recording. I'm going to now share my screen. Don, can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Double thumbs up should be the agenda. And now I will turn it over to you to kick us off, Don.
Great. In the world of back-to-back Zoom meetings, rushing right in to join us. So welcome everybody from sunny, for the moment, Washington State. We will do the same thing we did last month. I think we're going to do an actual roll call for the members, and then we would like everybody else to check in the chat, their name and organization. So with that, Richard, you want to help us with roll call?
I absolutely do. Thank you, Don. Yes, as everyone has just heard, please use the chat function. Let us know you're in the meeting. I don't see any phone numbers or other weird looking items in the picture. So I assume everyone's on using the Zoom video function. So let's start with the steering committee. Don, I see you're here. And Jen, you checked in. Andy from Michigan.
I'm here.
Great. Brody, Colorado.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Liz, Florida.
Good afternoon.
Exactly.
Corrected after.
It depends on your perspective. Caitlin from Tennessee.
I'm here.
Kristen from Iowa.
Here.
Great. Shelley from New Hampshire.
Here.
Shirley from Mississippi.
Here.
Great. Wiley from Alabama.
Here.
Great. Mark from Texas. Okay. Dave from Mexico. All right. And last but not least, Charles Carr from Mississippi. Mr. Carr. All right. He said he might be running late and join us later. So he also he's in the middle of a commission meeting. So we talked earlier. So he might or might not make it. We don't know. Either way, I can see the chat still coming in. Thanks everyone for signing on. And now I will turn it back to our chair to introduce our first item.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to have Kansas with us today. And here to talk to us is presenter John Moore to talk about some of the access and innovation and collaboration work they're doing in Kansas. Go ahead, John.
Okay. Let me just get this back to share screen option. 1 second.
And if I could encourage people who are not speaking to turn off their video, just so to save bandwidth. Go ahead, John, I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. My options seem to be limited here for whatever reason.
So it looks like Richard has it up if you just want to tell him to forward the slides if you want.
Yeah, let me. Okay.
John, can you see the home screen or your first slide?
Yeah, I'm kind of zoomed out. I'm trying to find the full screen option. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
No problem, it's Zoom, it's to be.
Okay. There we go. All right, so thanks again, everybody. I'm actually on this with Corey Davis, our Assistant Bureau Chief as well. Appreciate Richard and the group giving us an opportunity to talk about a recent program we've started. This was begun initially before my time, so I thought I'd bring Corey in on this as he is the brains behind this operation. So With that, I wanted to give him an opportunity to introduce what the program is, definitions, and sort of kind of how we came about to begin this program just a few years ago, and so on and so forth. So with that, I will send it back to Corey, get us going.
All right, thanks, John. And as you turn it over to me, all my screens go blank. That's not helpful. But yeah, talking about the Access Innovation and Collaboration Program in Kansas, really excited about this program and what it has to offer for expanding mobility in Kansas and helping our transit providers do what they do best. So we can advance the slide, please. As John mentioned, I'm Corey Davis, Assistant Bureau Chief in Planning here at KDOT. I oversee public transit, rail and freight program, bicycle and pedestrian, and our metropolitan planning oversight. And then you all know John. He does a great job as our state public transit manager. Next slide. So I want to talk today about how this program came to fruition, kind of define it for the group. And then John's going to talk about some of the eligible activities, applicants, some past projects, and some of the more fine details of the program. Next slide. So recently, I guess it's a year ago now, right before the pandemic really kicked into gear, we passed, the legislature passed a 10-year transportation program. And that program is going to allow us to maintain funding levels and keep our state funded transit program moving. And we did that by going out multiple times and holding what we call local consult, where we really go out, talk to the locals, whether it be local elected officials, local citizens. We really made ourselves available and talked about our programs and really tried to understand what the need was in Kansas, not only with regard to public transportation, but aviation, rail, and then of course our major highway needs. So very public oriented process to really help us define what Kansans and what our locals need in Kansas. Next slide. So we have the Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Program, which is in place. And I can't say enough how important this is for us to have this consistent, dedicated funding. For transit alone, it guarantees $11 million a year in state funds for the next 10 years, and even provides an opportunity for us to shift funds if we can define a bigger need in transit as compared to aviation or a short line rail program. We have the opportunity to flex those funds into a transit pot of funding. So the program gives us flexibility, which allows us to create flexible programs, which is what the Access Innovation and Collaboration Program is. A big focus from what we heard when we were out doing local consult is there's an opportunity to right-size things and make practical improvements. We need to look at mode shift and really identify when we are investing into a highway project or a roadway project that we are really considering all modes when we're doing that. So this program gives us an opportunity to continue to do that and even strengthen that opportunity. What's important when we're talking the AIC program is really the program before it, which was T-Works. It was the 10-year program that just ended, which led us into Ike. And that program defined our state spending, which was $11 million a year for those 10 years as well. And it's identified a commuter discretionary fund where we were to invest in commuter projects. What we found out through that process, as travel changed, there wasn't as much of a need for those commuter funds here in Kansas, as we look a little different in the Midwest than other states do. So commuter-based transit was not a priority, and since we had those funds dedicated to that, and they weren't being applied for, we had a pot of money, approximately $5 million, that we were trying to identify a way to spend those and make it available to everybody that needed it. So what we did for the Access Innovation and Collaboration Program is combined those state funds with federal resources to offer an application for projects and really create a wide ranging opportunity for folks to apply. Next slide, please. So what we created was what I've been discussing, access, innovation, and collaboration. A huge issue in Kansas is healthcare access for our rural folks, and I know that mimics the rest of the country. And I wanted to create a program that would allow people to apply for whatever the hindrance was that was challenging, making that a challenge for them. So whether it's a vehicle, a different type of vehicle, whether it's just funding collaboration between a private healthcare and a public transit entity. We wanted to look at innovating. We have electric vehicles and potentially autonomous transit becoming more of a stronghold. And we wanted to make this funding available for those kind of efforts as well. And we just want to collaborate. We wanted to understand what the need was. We had the resources to help financially. So if they let us know what they need, then we have the opportunity to make it available for them. So we end up using our first call for projects, which John will talk some project specifics here shortly. We really used 5339 funds, we used 5311 funds, we used 5304 funds, and state funds. So we had 4 different funding sources, and we were able to define which funding source we were going to use based on that was submitted. So it gave us the ultimate flexibility in how we were able to use, whether it be state resources or federal resources, and based on the requirements for a different project, we could really make the best decisions possible and define how that funding was being used. And that was the theme and the reason that this program was brought to life. Next slide. So a little more on the program. It says there multiple years of funding. So we had a buildup of 5339 funds from a couple years. So we were able to use multiple years of 5339 funds. We were always, and I didn't even mention this earlier, we also use smaller than 5310 funds for a couple projects. So that's the key. We had the opportunity to fund really a lot of projects. We had 15 million available, and I think we awarded, I think it was 7. You have to correct me if I'm wrong, John. 7 million.
I think that number's further down the presentation.
Okay. So really, it was all about flexibility. Us trying to identify what they needed, them being the local transit providers, and then giving us the opportunity to fund it in a much more flexible manner. Next slide. With that, I will hand it over to John. Happy to take questions after this if there's any more about how we came up with the program. But John's going to talk about what's eligible and some of the cool projects we have underway.
Thanks, Corey. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little background to kind of where we started and where we're at now. We're just in the middle of our call for projects for 2021. So we'll kind of get into those processes a little bit later. Just wanted to real quick go over some of the potential projects that we're hoping folks apply for or that we've seen in the past. And so it's a picture of our Transit Day at the Capitol that we've done in the past every year. This year wasn't as successful with the pandemic, but so it gives you a range of sort of vehicle types that we usually expect. Next slide. So not only just a vehicle program, but we're also looking at other options that, whether it be, as part of a transit center or other vehicle related items, whether it be fare boxes, passenger counters, any number of things. So a lot of that is usually what we put into our 5339 pot of funding as well. So next slide. Also bus facilities, we have a few going currently. I think just with the, as far as FTA side of things, we've been able to kind of progress that along and sort of find those sites that are a little more recent that can be kind of pushed through further. So we're taking one bite at a time. I believe we had, what was it? Was it 5 or 6 facilities, I think, that are currently in the works. So it's really been a great program for folks to get something not only to remove vehicles from the elements, but also just when it comes to actual tangible opportunities for folks to get together with other agencies as well for their vehicle needs. Next slide. And then, like Corey was saying, we're dealing with a lot of innovative programs too with electric vehicles, software. Microtransit has definitely grown in the Kansas City area, especially our friends in Johnson County, suburb of Kansas City. They've had several pilots get started across there. They started with a small portion of the county, and they've progressively grown from that initial bubble that they're providing service in. The picture there currently is a service that was being provided on Saturdays. There's a morning market that they have in the old downtown part of Overland Park, Kansas. So that's a great opportunity for folks to not only get to healthy foods, but also just a way to not use your car to get to a event like that. There's a lot of parking issues in that vicinity too. So that's another transportation option for them. Next slide. Eligible applicants are, this is probably more for the folks that are applying itself, but really any of the folks that would be eligible for any of our other 5311 10 type funding programs. There is a little bit of flexibility given part of the funding that we include in this pot of funds is state funds, so separate from some of those federal requirements. So there certainly is some flexibility there. Next slide. Success stories. So this is an opportunity we had in Coffee County, just a few counties south of the Kansas City area. This was an opportunity where we were able to expand from an existing facility. And so we added an additional 3 bus bays. And in addition to that, I guess prior to this facility, there was very limited space where pretty much, you had the director, dispatcher, drivers all pretty much shared the same space within their existing building. And so this new facility will give them an opportunity to kind of have their own space and be able to spread out a little bit. And that's certainly important these days with the ongoing pandemic. So great project there that I believe is through final design now. So next slide. Some other smaller success stories when it comes to radio replacement. There were some safety concerns over there in access when we were able to provide that ladder cage for them to increase mobility within their vehicle facility there. So that was a quick win, easy win for us there. They're located out in Northwest Kansas in Hayes. Next slide. Another one was great. This is Flint Hills area. They are located in the Manhattan, Kansas area where the University of Kansas State is located. This was a really collaborative opportunity where not only we got the transit agencies some much needed resources, but also they're able to get the student population, university population to actually design some of the bus stops, and then a local firm to construct the stops as well. So it's really a collaborative effort that not only included some free labor potentially with the university population, but also supporting local economy in producing those bus stop shelters. So next slide. So those are a good example of kind of the range of projects that we deal with on the basis usually. As we were saying before, about almost $7.5 million was awarded last year, 2020. Pictured below is our Transit Day of the Capitol event where we were able to announce those projects. And like I said, next slide, we do have a new call that just opened actually last week. And so as far as how funding is broken down, we do an 80-20 split, but then there are some opportunities where we're able to add an additional 10% to potential projects that are leaning towards our planning efforts. So we're statewide business model has some strategies that include collaboration, a lot of the things that this program tries to accomplish. So at least in their application process, that's something that we like to see, that we're certainly interested in investing a little bit more than usual for those particular projects. Next slide. And so what it looks like here, so March 5th, we released the call a little bit different this time around. We ended up starting with a concept paper. So this kind of came around when, similar to our transportation alternatives program, where folks are able to kind of give us more of a rough idea of what they're thinking about, some ballpark figures for cost estimates, but really kind of have that one-on-one opportunity like we'll have in April, where we'll sit down with those potential applicants, and before they actually go through the project application process, they'll have an opportunity to sit down and talk to us about their plans. So really saves time on both ends there. So we're really looking forward to that. And additional funding sources also, the stimulus funding, while we're going through that with our 100% match currently on our 10 and 11 program. We also will potentially have some additional funds to take out of that in regards to CARES Act and so on and so forth. So next slide. So yeah, real quick, if anybody has any questions about the specifics to the program, feel free to contact either Corey or myself. I did include our public transit webpage where there'll be a flyer that we've circulated to all our providers and initial applicants. So additional information can be found there as well. So unless anybody has any questions, I know, Richard, we have a few opportunities to have some discussion, but just wanted to leave the floor open if anybody had anything in mind.
I had a few things, Richard. I know you, well, maybe we'll remind folks if they have any other questions, they can put them into the chat. Otherwise, I'll start us off. The other thing you can do, I think, is sometimes just turn on your camera, and that makes us aware that you are interested in saying something. So this is I really love the layout. It's really actually pretty similar to what we do here in Washington in terms of laying out the different programs. Do you have any planning requirements that you do in order to be eligible for these funds? So for example, I know, for when we distribute 5310, you have to be in the Human Services Transportation Plan. Do you extend that requirement to anything or not?
I'd say when using, so that's what we benefit from. If there is something that there's a planning requirement from the federal side of things, we can use state funds to kind of skirt around that. We don't do that a lot, but and really the big thing is another focus that I didn't mention that John kind of hit on is getting folks to take the planning requirements seriously, where we can up our ante if you really take the documents we prepare and the effort we put into it seriously. So that was another thought behind it.
Yeah, and that's actually a good segue to my next question. Was I think you said that planning projects were an eligible expense. What kind of planning projects do people typically ask for?
I'd say one example, and we only funded one in the last call. There was an electric vehicle fleet conversion study for the Topeka Metro.
That's something we're all dealing with. Cool. And then I know you said 5339. I can't remember if you said 5307 or not. Goes into this bucket, and I was curious if you are using your small urban 5339 or just the state apportionment.
5307, we don't administer any, so it is not in there. But yes, we do our statewide 5339 and our small urban 5339
apportionment. Great. And then my last question is, how are transits primarily funded in Kansas? Where do they get the bulk of their revenue?
John, you want to take that?
Sorry, as far as just agency specifically, or?
Yeah.
I would think when we're talking about a rural perspective, most of the folks that are getting their local entities is usually from a mill levy type general fund, things like that. And that's certainly been something that we've been discussing too, as far as folks' ability to continue that, considering all the other limitations that have occurred with the pandemic. So being able to provide that 100% match for those local rural providers has really been a great help to them specifically. And I think potentially we'll be able to continue that on up until the end of the calendar year this year. So.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Did anybody else have any other questions?
Any other questions from anybody around during today's meeting? If not, we have questions for discussion. John, do you want to take away on the first one?
Sure. So the first question I'm sorry. So this is the questions for who is this?
The audience.
For the audience. Okay, very good. Thank you. Has the pandemic increased or decreased applicants for capital grant funds? That's interesting. And I want everybody to chime in. They can turn on their camera. They can type the answer in the chat. And I know for Washington State, it's kind of done the opposite, and I'm still projecting at this point, because the CARES and CRISA money is mostly being used for operating. All the local revenue is being switched over and being used for capital expenditures at this time. And at least that's what I'm projecting. What do other people find? I see Suzanne's.
I see Suzanne said decreased for her, for Tennessee.
Yeah, I guess
New Hampshire, yeah.
Yeah,
background-
John, go ahead.
the background behind that question too is the fact that the way this timed out and everything, our awards in our initial round of applications was basically this time last year. And so we don't really have that sort of record of impact of how it'll happen this year. So we're just kind of interested to see if we'll get, an decrease amount of applicants this time around, given what's happened in the last 12 months.
So one of the things that we've seen in Washington in previous, taking the pandemic out of it and replacing with the word recession, is that during a recession, everyone takes money out of their capital reserve fund in order to keep the buses rolling. And what that does is create a latent demand after the recession is over for, okay, now we've got all these old buses that we need to replace. My gut is at this point is that, as I was saying before, that because we're getting so much operating money for our rural systems right now, that I don't think it's probably going to be the same.
So let me go through the chat now, just real quickly. Marcia from Oregon said increased in Oregon due to increased need for vehicles so that social distancing can be maintained. In Arizona, there's been no change, but Eric Taylor in Alaska poses an interesting question. Can you talk more about the collaborative meeting prior to application? Examples of things that have been discussed and resolved. John or Corey?
I can speak to that from the transportation alternatives perspective. And the reason, a little more on the reason we do it is, and it's actually going to good follow up for a question that John's going to ask here shortly. And it's locals having the resources to fully understand program requirements and having the capability to come to the table with a good, strong application. A lot of times they need some coaching. And in the past, it would take them to apply, get denied, and then we'd have to respond and let them know why they weren't awarded. But we want to help them up front and have those conversations after they provide the concept paper. So it could be anything from back to the transportation alternatives. We'll see folks wanting to fund a project crossing a railroad, but they've never talked to the railroad. And so pointing those things out and getting them to start those conversations for project specific details are the kind of things we talk about after that with that one-on-one consultation.
So we have another question. John, you want to read this one?
Do any members provide technical assistance for interested grant applicants? And I'll kick us off again. We have a group that we call our community liaisons. And the specific job for the community liaisons across, there's a place-based throughout the state into 5 different regions. And what they do is provide the support for developing the ideas. And so in Washington State, we actually do have a pre-planning requirement. we take that that coordination requirement that exists in the 5310 program, and as a matter of policy, we send it out to everything within what we call our consolidated grant program, which is similar to your layout with 5311, 5310. We have a couple of state buckets of money that we add in there, as well as the the statewide apportionment of the 5339. And our community liaisons sit in on those planning sessions, help identify what the needs are in the community, and based on their experience say, gosh, well, you have a senior center here in town, even though you don't have transit, maybe we can talk to them about being a lead to address this need, and then provide coaching before they apply. And then because they're so involved in this pre-planning work, they then cut themselves off when it comes time for the competitive process. And so the reviewers are a totally separate group that end up working on it. How do other people address that?
Feel free to use the chat or just turn on your mic and your video so we can see if you're interested in answering the question. Feel free to chime in.
I had to clear the deck of a couple cats, but now I can turn on. I wish I were joking. We have a partnership with the University of Tennessee, and we call it the MTAP program, funded with planning and research funds. We use them to help, especially rural communities, with a multimodal access grant that we have. It's been really helpful because the small communities don't know how to budget for, say, a sidewalk improvement or a bike lane or something like that. We haven't really, the answer I gave on the last one was about a transit funding program. We have competitive transit funding that we've been doing for a few years, and demand could be down this year because, you know, maybe the communities that have projects ready to go kind of already got in line and got funds. So I don't know if I can totally say that demand is down, but we did have fewer applications this year. But so I'll just add that we haven't used that TTAP program exactly to help people plan for transit improvement grants, but I think that might be a good, and we also have the RTAP, like someone else is putting in here. But so we have a couple different resources that we use as well.
Thank you. Brody, why don't you come and tell us a little bit more about how you're using those RTAP funds? I'm sorry, Suzanne, were you not done?
It was a finding in our upcoming statewide active transportation plan to do more support to smaller communities in particular. So it might be something that we'll think about expanding as well.
Go ahead, Brody.
Hey guys, sure. So we use RTAP to help us with our competitive program, right? So B and C 5339. We found that the first year we didn't use that, we got a big fat donut, right? And as soon as we started using RTAP funds to help them become technically not technically challenged anymore, I guess, in writing those applications, we saw a really great return on that investment, right? And so we've seen funding come in for B and C each year now using those funds. And we see it as it's helping those agencies, well, one, better understand FTA, two, write a better application for other processes, right? But then they're also seeing those funds come in. So it's been a great program. And that's between us and our state agency, you know, it's called CASTA, and then using those RTAP funds, and they go out and hire a consultant. It's been quite productive, to say the least.
Great.
Well, we have one
Don't steal
more.
our idea, though.
We have one more discussion question. John, should we go to it?
Sure. Do any members use a similar vetting process prior to accepting grant applications? And can you elaborate a little bit more on what the vetting process is?
Yeah, so I was really just referring to our strategy of the concept paper and our one-on-one meetings. We're also going to be, usually we do a few rounds of in-person workshops, but just due to the COVID restrictions, we're just going to do that online. But really just kind of curious to see what sort of outreach folks do to help support folks who are applying for grants. And I think we already kind of touched on that a little bit in the prior question, but I think specific to the concept paper too, just kind of curious if folks have sort of that interim request for documentation before the official application is processed.
So I talked a little bit about the stuff that we do within what we call our consolidated program in terms of the local planning, but I'll address this in a different way. We also have a grant program we call Regional Mobility. And the most similar thing regional mobility is to 5339, except it's only for expanded service. And one of the things that we do is we require concept letters when someone is proposing to expand service either through a capital construction project or operating. And we take those concept letters and shop them at our DOT region offices and say, hey, here's what they're saying they're going to do. Is there anything you can suggest that would make this project have a better impact on the overall transportation system? And we found that to be a really good way, not only to create dialogue around that specific project, but to get our regional planners and traffic offices and other folks more involved in thinking about public transportation as a potential solution for a problem that they're trying to address. And so looking at the chat, it looks like you use Brody saying they use a new grantee questionnaire before they allow them to apply. Anybody else want to weigh in on your vetting process? And when you say vetting, so Brody answered it in a slightly different way. Are you talking about determining whether or not the grantee might be eligible, or is it more about the project being eligible?
Yeah, I'd probably say more on the project eligibility, because I think just considering the folks that were invited to this program and getting involved in the webinar, we've already sort of done that process of like just verifying their status and their requirements internally. So, but yeah, I would also still say both, depending on what types of partnerships they're anticipating in that eventual project. So.
All right, I see nothing in the chat, so hopefully people get everything out of this. We got something out of this.
So this was fun. I liked the discussion part at the end. I always like learning about what other states do in the way that they manage their programs. So thank you very much for sharing your information with us. I see some ideas or thoughts are continuing to trickle in on the chat, so be sure to stay tuned there. And thank you very much to both of you for sharing what you do and for asking us questions. I think that's great. That's really the way that MTAP works, is that we're providing that peer-to-peer support with each other.
Thanks for everybody's time and the opportunity.
And before we even get into the further discussion, I mean, this kind of opportunity is open for any and all members of MTAP. So we look to use the first 15, 20, even 30 minutes of our meetings to do sort of peer-to-peer learning. And we hope that others that take advantage of it. And, I listened to the membership when we did our call for issues and topics for the winter meeting. We had a whole list. We couldn't use all of them for the winter meeting. So now I'm periodically going to go through that list and pull topics and ask members to speak on them. And this is sort of our first opportunity to get a topic that was chosen back in December for an upcoming MTAP steering committee meeting. We hope others would take advantage of it as well. Because you don't have to wait for us to tell you, you tell us. That's what we're about.
All right, are we ready to segue into our work plan updates?
As I like to call it, work plan updates, emphasis areas, and or the business. And sometimes it's the lightning round, depending on how much time we have left in the meeting, but we're not going to fly through this section. Just updates on communications. We see newsletters and alerts. I'll start with newsletter. We are currently in the midst of accepting articles for the upcoming winter spring MTAP newsletter. It's a biannual one. It comes out usually around April, May in the spring, and or October, November in the fall and we're accepting articles. Currently, we have a number of members working on articles for us. The major article will be a winter meeting recap, where we'll do some briefs on some of the sessions, including budget shortfalls, facilities construction, NTD census, grants management, and hopefully, if Brody gets to it, one on performance metrics. So essentially, members will summarize their presentations and send them in. We'll incorporate them into our recap on the MTAP, on the winter meeting for MTAP. We'll have an article on research. We'll have an article on COVID-19 vaccination process, and we'll have a guest article written by the FTA, and she's working on it right now, the FTA Acting Administrator Nuria Fernandez, to talk about safety. So if members are interested in submitting an article, feel free to let me know. And again, just something on some project you're working on that you just want to get people aware of and just to get out there. Are there any questions or any comments? Seeing none. In terms of alerts, everyone should know or should have seen emails from me, because I know you love seeing emails from me about a couple of reports that were completed MTAP alerts that were just posted. Indiana DOT had an alert on technical assistance consultants, and we thankfully provided them a significant list that will help with their, I think it's not an RFP, but RFI. So that hopefully will help them, as well as Caltrans. They sent out an alert asking for assistance on improving 5310 call for projects and scoring processes. So you should all know, you should have copies of the summaries of those reports, as well as more detailed responses will be posted on the MTAP members only website. I figure we post those there because it's got contact information for all of our members, and I'm not sure we want to make those PDFs widely available. So if you want to download the more detailed answers, feel free to go visit our website. Now you should know we have one MTAP alert that is currently open. It is currently on behalf of Virginia DRPT. Responses are due on March 12th. Unfortunately, we only have 9 respondents, but I'm going to now turn it over to Jen DeBrule to talk a little bit more about what they're looking for. Jen?
Thanks, Richard. And I want to start off and thank Richard for being extraordinarily patient with us as we tried to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, into our MTAP alert. We had a very interesting virtual legislative session this year that came out with some very good things for transit in Virginia. One of the more challenging but exciting items that we're working on is a statewide transit equity and modernization study. The legislative language for this study was developed with a number of different and very diverse stakeholder groups. And as a result, it is a conglomeration of a lot of different topic areas under the nomenclature of an equity and modernization study. What it ends up being is a statewide transit needs assessment that is being accomplished under or through a lens of equity considerations and through a lens of applying innovation and technology to our transit systems kind of on a statewide basis. So just in some of the preliminary work that we've done, I don't know that there are many states that have undertaken a study like this or a portion of it, but we are trying to gather as much information as we can from other states about the universe of different types of statewide needs assessments that have been done, so we can look at them, look at examples, because honestly, we're having a very challenging time kind of getting our arms around this study, scoping the study, and getting it together so that it can be accomplished within the legislated time frame, which is to complete an interim report by December 1st of this year and a final report by August of 2022. So we do have a tight time frame. So I appreciate the 9 states that have already responded, and if others could take a look at the MTAP alert, and if you have suggestions to offer us on experiences you've had in your state, we would greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions about what we're doing or what we're looking for, always feel free to reach out to me. My contact information was also included in the MTAP alert.
So I know, Jen, you and I were chatting a little bit offline too. When I logged in to start filling out the survey, my first thing that came out to me was, gosh, we're doing these things not all in one study though, right?
Right.
And I think you kind of said, well, that doesn't matter. Please just answer anyway, even if you're doing it not in the same study. It's kind of a lot to try to put all into one study.
It is a lot to put into one study. So that is a great clarification. If you've done 1, 2, 3 of those elements, it does not, we're not necessarily looking for somebody who's done all of that in one study, because I don't expect that many people have.
Well, and it'll be great too for us. I know we're hearing the same things out of our legislature right now too, in terms of, we want you to do more with equity. We want you to do more in electrification. We want you to do more with automation. And so I think we're all headed that direction. And so hopefully we'll ask you next year to report out on how it all went.
Yeah, I think if it was if the legislation had been drafted a little bit more open-ended to allow us to develop maybe more of a policy plan, I think it would have been easier for us to get our hands around it. But some of the more vocal stakeholders actually started off with legislative language, which would have required us to do a statewide audit and inventory of all of those different aspects. We were able to work with the patron of the bill and really get some language we were more comfortable with, but it's a little bit daunting. So we've already talked, Liz has already sent me some stuff from Florida, and Marcia sent me a plan that they've recently completed in Oregon. So we're getting some good examples. That input is so helpful to us. So appreciate everybody taking time to respond to the MTAP alert.
And just please keep the responses coming. I think your answers will be very informative and will help Jen scope her study. All right, so let's move on to, so we're done with the alerts. Now back up to, in terms of membership update, you should know that we currently have 41 paid state DOT members of MTAP as of right now. Thankfully, we're 7 short of our last year's numbers, but it is COVID, and so I expect there to be certain delays. And as if you visited our website, you'll notice that there's a map, which is part of my update in terms of what's been updated on the MTAP website. Is the membership map has been updated to reflect current members, but you should know that our accounting office is currently processing checks. It's a weird dynamic. So when they process checks at a different rate than they process ACH payments. So they're in the process of processing all of February checks. So we'll see hopefully our membership jump at the next meeting. So please stay tuned for an update on that. Currently 41 paid members. And in addition to, in terms of the website, and in addition to the membership map update, we have new upcoming events, webinars, and trainings posted. FTA has posted a number of things, as well as NTI, and you'll see those usually in the bi-weekly e-news, but those are also posted to our website as well, so feel free to check it out. On to the next topic of the budget. So the last financial statement has been approved. It's from January. It shows revenues currently at 187,000, expenses for the program at 63,642 for a net revenue of $123,358. But that net revenue also includes, we'll go to pay my salary. So I'm just saying, we're not flush with cash. We definitely have a surplus, which is good, and we will look to hopefully spend it wisely. On to the next topic, MTAP meetings. So currently, we have 2 meetings coming up. First, unfortunately, Charles is not on the phone. First is the planning for the state DOT roundtable. So in absence of the CTAA Expo, he and I have been talking about the possibility of holding the state DOT roundtable virtually in early June. We've come to no resolution as to whether or not we should, but we will look. He asked me, since he's not on the phone, to ask a few questions of the members. And I'll pose this, the first one is, does the membership feel there's value in holding the state DOT roundtable this year online? I'm going to pose that as a question to everybody. Hopefully you can feel free to chime in via chat. Feel free to turn on your microphone and turn on your camera and let us know.
So the thing I struggle with upon hearing that question, actually, I talk a lot. Kristen, go ahead.
I find value in it. I like hearing from other states and seeing your faces and just knowing what other states are up to.
The question I was going to ask is, what's the difference between a virtual roundtable and this meeting? And so we tend to do, there seems to be a lot of overlap. I guess the thing that we would usually add to that is, and I'm thinking out loud with everybody, so bear with me, is we usually add content from CTAA, from FTA, from National RTAP, and maybe some others. And so maybe that's the answer to my question, is it's kind of a set time to kind of get not only hear from us, but also from our partners. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, again, the concern or the issue that Charles wants to address in this meeting, wanted to address in this meeting this year and then going forward, was that we've sort of gotten away from, I guess, in his opinion, the purpose of the state DOT roundtable. It has been, since I've come on board, sort of very scripted. So very, okay, so we have our opening remarks. We have FTA come in and do its thing. CTAA does its presentation because we're at the expo. FTA does its thing. National RTAP comes in and gives an update. And then we have been populating it with allowing sort of the host state from wherever we are, give sort of an update or a presentation, like if we were in Kansas, like this would be like the one that Kansas DOT just presented, would update us on project. And then we use the last few minutes of the meeting to go around the table and talk about just issues. And I guess in Charles's mind, and I understand this, before I even came on board, the direction of that winter meeting was, the state DOT roundtable was less scripted and more of an actual roundtable and less, and more member focused, like go around the room and talk about what's happening. Again, in the virtual setting, that makes it difficult slightly.
We'd have to facilitate it,
It
essentially.
would have to be a facilitated discussion of sorts. But if you find it useful, we're happy to plan for it. It's just a matter of how do we plan for it and how do we structure. Then he and I, of course, have to work out, how we structure it, what we talk about. We can't have dead air. It's just, if you find value in it, we should do it. But it's sort of in a more of a facilitated manner, more of a methodical way, leaving room for a conversation to occur and more conversation, but do it in a different way than it's been done in the past. And I'd love to know what people think. I've heard sorry.
People should chime in on the in the chat, yays and nays. We could do breakout rooms for sure. That's what one of the things that my mind was going to too, is that we could do some sort of facilitated discussions, have a question that we all want to struggle with, do breakout rooms on topics and come back and report or something like that, or even and things like that.
We could 100%. I think that's a great idea. I've just been, how do I say this? Zoom terrified, because when I hit the thing about doing breakout sessions, and for everybody, you should know, you can do in Zoom involuntary or voluntary. You know, you have to sign up in advance. Okay, so what breakout room do you want to be in? We have to have a list of, you know, breakout rooms, and then have people sign up, and I can assign people to breakout rooms and so on and so forth. But there would have to be some sort of registration process. Or I just hit go, and it just, everybody would split up, and it would happen because Zoom makes it happen. And everybody would break up. It would be like this meeting, only everybody broken up into various different rooms. And then someone would have to volunteer to take notes. That's all. I like to see Eric has agreed to the breakout rooms. Brody, good idea. All right, so let me get back with Charles and we can mull it over a little bit more, come up with a better framework for how we want to deal with the State DOT roundtable. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate your input. And thanks everyone for your input, and Caitlin as well. All right, so next in terms of meetings, I promised to have an update on the State Partnerships Conference, the Public Transportation Partnerships Conference, which is aimed for this summer. And the best I could squeeze out of FTA was that they're still looking at the last more dynamic, the last 2 weeks of July or the first week of August are the dates that they're considering for this. Again, the reason for the delay is that Elon Flippen, who's the program manager for Section 5311, she's out on maternity leave, and they've promoted Sarah Clement into her as an acting. So she's taking on the role of organizing this, along with Danielle Nelson, who's the acting chief of rural and targeted programs. She's actually in that position because Marianne Stock has been promoted. She's the new acting director of transit programs. So everyone seems to be getting promoted in that section as well. So they're slightly delayed, and I think in the next week or so, we're going to have another conference call or Microsoft Teams meeting, whatever they want to call it, to talk about getting more of a definitive schedule for this. And hopefully I'll have a more definitive answer for everybody on the next meeting.
Hey, Richard,
Yes, ma'am.
is that supposed to be in person or virtual?
That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. Thank you. I have a great answer for you, or sort of an obtuse answer.
I don't know.
I have no idea. No, I don't know. I presume it's going to be, no, I don't want to presume. They're searching for either it's either going to be virtual or hybrid.
Got it.
So that's, I think, the best I can say, but I will ask that. That's a good question. I will ask that question when we have our Microsoft Teams meeting in another week or two. But other than that, are there questions about meetings?
I guess it ties back to our previous topic too. And so CTAA has now been moved to what, November? And there might be an opportunity to do our winter meeting then, right? Yeah, you're nodding.
Well, I mean, we haven't made a final decision, and Shane's on the phone. Shane's on the meter, and he could type in as well on this topic. But we haven't talked about the winter meeting. But there would definitely be. It's sort of kind of coincides with our meeting. Like they schedule the expo, you know, and again, it's in Richmond, and Jim's going to love to have us all there. But it would be very timely to have us coincide or have to to partner up with CPA on this one and post our own meeting there while they're having their expo. We'd have to come up with sort of a timing for it, but I think it could work.
Hey, Richard,
Yes.
it's Jen. We actually met with CTAA last week about the expo, and it is planned to be a fully in-person event in Richmond in November. So I will just say on behalf of our agency, we're willing to host if this group wants to do a winter meeting in conjunction with CTAA. The expo is literally 3 blocks from our office. So
Jen, can you guarantee good weather?
November is hit or miss in Richmond. It can be amazingly beautiful or it could be cold and yucky, but
I guess we'll
we'll
have to-
go with beautiful. I'll give you a 80% chance of beautiful.
Wow,
There you go.
better than the COVID vaccine. Um,
Oh, yeah. So one of the things, actually, I'm sorry, before we even leave meetings, I want to bring up just sort of on the topic of the state DOT roundtable is, I don't know, how do the members feel about, here's a story. I think ASHTO is sort of pushing us in a direction where we're going to need to start charging for certain meetings that are not like this type of a meeting, like the meeting of the steering committee, we don't charge for because that's just a business meeting and we've never charged for that. But something like the state DOT roundtable, which is, everybody who would go would fly to, would pay the registration fee to join the expo, but then would come for the state DOT roundtable, unless you just decided to fly down just for the roundtable and leave. But would people be amenable to some sort of a fee for that? Again, I can't say with 100% that I have to charge for it, but I think some folks in meetings and people who are pay grade that's above mine are pushing us in that direction.
So, and to specify, Richard, are you talking about virtual meetings too, in addition to in person? Yeah. I kind of do a shoulder shrug. I know that I've so far, I would say ASHTO has been the outlier, that our winter meeting was free. And that for most of the other kind of groups I'm involved with that have done their conferences and stuff like that, we've still had to come up and pay for some sort of registration.
And I mean, I'm talking a nominal fee. We're not talking, like the winter meeting charge of $225 for members and $325 for non-members. I mean, I would anticipate $25, $50 maybe. And of course, if you did, we'd have to work out the details with our meeting people, our meeting staff, but we could easily do something like have a registration where you automatically hit, or you can check a box that says, I want to use my MTAP fees, my funds for this. And
well, that was going to be my next
it would
question.
it would just happen without any transaction.
I saw Shelley had her hand up and it disappeared.
I think I answered her question.
Yeah, that was basically my question. Administratively, is it going to be more of a burden for us all to pay this fee and then request the reimbursement through you guys? And if no one's putting in for it, is it a net gain for the program to just not charge a fee? But if we could do it with a one click, then and administratively it works for you guys, then it's fine by me. But just seems like it may not be worth a nominal fee to have to process it.
Yeah, I mean, are we the only program that has that fellowship type arrangement with ASHTO? No. I guess
we
I
are,
would reduce
we are the only program where half your dues are dedicated to travel reimbursements.
Okay.
Every other program is sort of either as needed or maybe 10% is allocated. And it's a different process. For us, it's a hard, you can use $2,500 for travels, period.
Can't we just alter whatever needs to be altered and take some off the top to hold the meetings?
I don't know. I don't know. It's just sort of, I wanted to throw it out there since we're having this meeting. I wanted to kind of throw that out there to see if people would be like, oh, I'm never going to show up to a meeting like that if I have to pay for it. That's ridiculous. I don't want, if there's that visceral reaction, I would throw it to our meetings folks and be like, hey, this is not something we would do. So we're just going to keep doing what we do. Dave, I'm sorry,
This is Dave. I appreciate Kristen's suggestion, but I think that takes away, I wouldn't want my $2,500 of fees of travel to go towards hosting MTAP meetings. I want that to be a choice, so I just want to maintain that flexibility.
I don't think, I didn't understand what you were saying, David. What is your
Like,
proposal?
like if you said, so if $2,500 of our $5,000 dues, they said, we're gonna take 500 to hold meetings the whole year,
Oh, I see.
I would not want them.
You want the opt-in, you want the button.
Yeah, I want to say, hey, I want to pay for this, my $25 out of my MTAP fees,
Mhm.
or I'm gonna have my admin pay you directly.
Great. So Richard, I think what I'm hearing by and large is people don't have a problem with the dollar amount. What people are most concerned about is what kind of bureaucratic hassle is it going to be?
Right.
And,
No, my goal is never is to reduce bureaucratic hassle. Whatever our meetings department tells me. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, everybody. I appreciate the feedback. They haven't explicitly said it to me what they want to do, but I want to be prepared for the eventual conversation. If we do move forward with the State DOT Roundtable as a virtual, and they say to me, if you want to host it, you have to start charging members. I want to be prepared for that, the eventuality of that discussion. So thank you.
Shelley's
All
got it.
right, I'm done with meetings. So.
Hey, Richard.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Shelley's got her hand up.
Oh, Shelley, you don't have to raise your hand, Joe.
Just talking about the travel funds, has there been any discussion about having those available as carryover, since really not many people, not many states probably used them last year or this year?
We're in budget talk. We're in budget discussions right now. And we haven't had that discussion, but last year we had a carryover. It carried over to the program to be available, but not necessarily carried over. You now have double the amount of travel funds. It's carried over to the program for use by the program.
Okay, so New Hampshire wouldn't have 5,000 this year because we didn't use any of the 2,500.
It does not work that way.
Okay. Well, unprecedented times, you have to ask.
Yes, no, of course. All right, we're a little bit after the hour, 10 after the hour. Let's go to MTAP Coordination, Association Coalition Building. Well, everyone knows the CTA update. Is Charles on the phone? Did he come on late? He was supposed to. Only he would. He is not. So the only update on CTAA is that the expo has been moved to November, and hopefully we'll talk with them about cohabitating the winter meeting with them as well. Now to APTA, Jen.
Sorry, I just picked up my carpooler, so I apologize for any background noise. On the APTA front, the APTA Mobility Conference is coming up. It's the 16th and 17th of this month. That is all virtual. APTA has a couple more virtual events planned for this spring, a high-speed rail conference and a legal seminar, but is looking to transition to in-person events again later this year, including the Transform and Expo in Anaheim in September. So I don't think any registration is opened up yet for any of those in-person events. So I think it's still a fingers crossed mode. But in the meantime, they're continuing with virtual events. And then obviously lots of advocacy on the funding front as part of the COVID relief bill that passed this weekend. I think that's all I've got.
All right.
Don and National Archive.
Yeah, go on to National RTAP. Overlapping with this very meeting right now is National RTAP is hosting Intercity Bus Roundtable, looking at what's going on in that world. There is one of the things that piqued my interest of their new resources was they have a new best practices spotlight on transportation to scenic destinations. I assume that happens all over the country, but for example, here in Washington State, there's sometimes limited parking and you'll see a long line of cars white weaving up the mountains into various scenic destinations. And so looks at different alternative ways to get to scenic destinations across the country. And so that is a new resource available on the RTAP website. Another thing that we should highlight is I recognize several of the names that I used to normally see here on electronic grant management seminars. And so that was hosted recently, a webinar by RTAP, and is available on their website. So thank you to everybody who participated in that. There is a rural transit planning in the time of COVID and beyond webinar. I think that could be very helpful for many of our external partners trying to figure out how they do their work in the current environment. And then I know there's been lots of discussion about use of microtransit in rural areas. And so that webinar is also available on the National RTAP website. Richard always throws these into the various communications that we broadcast. And so I assume some of this stuff will be coming out soon too. I see a soft nod.
Yes, I do. I throw every update as I possibly can into our bi-weekly newsletter. So if you don't hear it here, check out the newsletter. It should be in the newsletter, usually with a clickable link. Are there any questions before we move on? Now, I leave FTA as a sort of up to all members. This is a kind of a discussion item. If the members have had an interesting conversation, any of the members of the steering committee with FTA and want to report out here, I will now open it up to all talk, all discuss.
So I know I was on a couple of calls or Zooms or MS Teams meetings this week where there was a lot of eye rolling over the new COVID-19 response program collection tool. It's like, what are they really even going to do with this information? Is this just another example of us putting in stuff? So I don't know what other people have heard about it, or if it's even worth bringing up in this group. So
I would equate that comment to my 12-year-old who likes to eye roll at everything.
I see.
I will add my eye roll to the conversation and just say that when everything started with COVID this time last year, we had a request from Region 3, actually to all of the grantees in Region 3 to provide updates on services. And then probably a month or so in, we got a call from Region 3 that none of the urban transit systems in Virginia were reporting to Region 3. So we ended up starting to share our weekly report to the governor's office with Region 3, and we've been reporting to them in that format every week ever since. So I'm not sure, I've never gotten clarification from them on what they needed, and we just simply gave them exactly the same document that we were providing to the governor's COVID task force. But at this point, I'm not quite sure what we would be reporting, because we haven't really been reporting much of anything in the last few weeks. And I keep trying to forget to send them something, and they keep reminding me that they're still looking for something from me. So
keep trying.
I've not sent anything for 2 weeks now, so I'm hoping that maybe they've forgotten. But it does look like this is going to replace that, and I'm not quite sure what the end game is.
That's what I was thinking too. I don't know what the purpose is. I don't, it's just one more thing. It's like when they asked all of us for how many vaccinations we would need for transit employees, and then that resulted in not a damn thing. I mean, none of our transit drivers got to go to the front of the line. I mean, we're all struggling and fighting with local public health to get our drivers vaccinated. So I mean, what's the point of all this data gathering? What do they do with it? I mean, yeah, have an end game.
Hey, Kristen, I'm right there with you, because we ran around on a weekend and collected all of that data for the rural transit agencies. And when we got the same request from the governor's office a week later, I called FTA to see if they would share the data they collected from the urban transit agencies, and they never called me back.
We did the exact same thing.
And so then we had to run around and collect the same data so that we could get our transit drivers prioritized. But it's been really frustrating, and it's kind of like now that things are hopefully, fingers crossed, starting to get better, now they want to put a system in place. I'm kind of eye roll, head scratch, whatever, face palm, whatever your emoji is today.
Yep. On another note, I got my first vaccination today, so
Yay.
Congratulations.
I'm excited.
This is Dave. I'm just sort of pacified by the fact that they gave us a whole bunch of money. So I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Fill out your form. Fill out your form.
That's what they were hoping.
Yeah,
And-
good point, Dave. Thanks.
Dave
And,
lived through ARA, so, right, Dave?
Yeah.
We lived through ARA, so if you made it through ARA and that
Yeah.
reporting, then you're not
Oh,
worried
that
about
was that. Yeah, compared to ARA, this was great.
This is free money compared to ARA and ARA
Yeah.
reporting.
Yeah, so I have that going for me, and I think Region 6 doesn't run us in so many circles as it sounds like they're doing in other places. So, that's just sort of why I'm pacified.
I think, and to clarify, if I had faith that they were going to do something with the information, I'd feel a lot better about the work to provide it.
Yeah, just like your milestone reports.
Right. Okay.
Oh, but so just as a little bit of background, one of our great colleagues complained that at a meeting once that they never did anything with our milestone reports, and why are we doing it? And I think in my case, we put bare minimum amount of effort into our milestone reports, and after that comment was made to the FTA administrator, all of a sudden they started caring about our milestone reports. This was probably 10 years ago. And so if you're going to complain to us, don't complain to the administrator that they're not doing anything with this reporting system. Because I don't know if there's some, I haven't seen what this looks like yet, but if there's some areas where you have to put in some paragraphs, your paragraph before of not applicable might not suffice if we start complaining. So.
All right. Here's the words of wisdom. Thank you, David Harris.
Yes.
Any other FTA things that people wanted to bring up? All right. Who is?
All right,
Richard, are you still here? I can't see you.
I'm here.
Okay. Technical initiatives.
All right, so just a few things coming up. Again, I listened to the membership and they want us to continue using that list of topics used for the winter meeting. So our next and upcoming technical initiative will be on March 18th on the topic of successful strategies for multimodal transit inclusion in statewide transportation planning. It will be moderated by steering committee member Wiley Brooks from Alabama. We'll hear from Oregon DOT, Minnesota DOT, and Virginia DRPT, and it'll be a very good, interesting conversation. Hour and a half. So see you on the 18th. Save the date has gone out as well as the agenda. So please, if you haven't received the calendar invitation, just let me know and I'll add you to the list. Feel free to also, one of the things we want to encourage members is forward it to your staff. Just hit forward and they can add themselves and register themselves. So everyone should have registration as well as the agenda. Next up, we're just so you know, we're planning a meeting. It's a webinar, but technically really is going to be a meeting. It will be hosted and moderated by the Council on Public Transportation and MTAP and Council Chair, Washington State's Secretary Roger Millar. And it will be on states coordinating transit access for COVID-19 vaccinations, we will hear best practices, and we'll hear, aside from best practices that we'll hear about from Ohio DOT and how it's using mobility management in the mobility management program to coordinate transit access for vaccinations. We'll hear again from Minnesota DOT about its mobile vaccination clinics, which they're doing not only in the greater Minneapolis area, but they're also taking it as a statewide program. So we'll hear from them as well. And surprise guest, we will maybe, I say maybe we'll have the FTA acting administrator, Nuria Fernandez, give us sort of an intro and a welcoming and whatever she wants to talk about in terms of safety as sort of the prelude to the conversation about vaccinations. Keep your fingers crossed. She's been invited. We'll see if she accepts. Are there questions about that? And again, that will be on April 15th at 11:30, from 11:30 to 1. Save the date will be going out for that this week. Yes, this week. Stay tuned for that. Next up, a discussion about the new training module, the FTA 201 results from the action alert to survey members. So I want to pivot over to that. You can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
The first question we'd asked was essentially suggesting and ranking topics that people would like to see in a new, more advanced training module. People are familiar with the FTA 101 training course that we have on our website. So we asked them about 201. What would you like to see in the next version? And here are the results of a really nice looking graph. But I thought we would also like to see more of the data that came back from the survey. Jenna, I wanted to know if you have this, you can see if you have this copy in front of you, if you wanted to talk a little bit about this. Jen DeBrol. She might have stepped away. But I think the top three that were chosen, or that folks would like to see, are basically in the same order, would be issues related to procurement, FTA basic reporter requirements, and SMRs. Those really rank really high. And then everything flows down from after that. I just wanted to show people the results of this alert. Now, what else would you consider in this advanced training module? People answered that question. I thought it was great. Let me blow this up a little bit so people can see. I don't know if there's anything that sticks out and that people have seen, but you all should know that if you've taken the FTA 101 course, the FTA 201 course we anticipate would be in the same vein, but a little bit more in depth into issues. So we might be able to tackle some of these topics. I can't say 100%. We're working with North Dakota State University, who was the original developer of the FTA 101. If they're interested in coming back, then I think we'll have a really good, if they want to come back and do the second level, we'll work with them to include as many topics as possible. But a lot of it has got to be, sort of, focused from the federal defense down, not necessarily from a state process, because everybody's different, right? Everybody's processes are different, so we have to be really careful about what we do.
Are these in any particular order, Richard?
Oh, these ones, no, these are just
Okay.
printed out. These are just printed right from the report. Whoever answered first.
Okay, not a ranking.
First, not a ranking. These are ranked. These are ranked. So
Yeah.
from the most popular down to the least popular. Cruise down a little bit. Here's the second page. Again, not by popularity, but just by individuals filling in a blank, what they'd like to see. And we asked the question of what do you want to get out of this training module? And overwhelming and top choice was to develop a solid understanding about each topic and issue. Which I think might be possible, but again, we'll see. Whoops, sorry. We're following closely behind to gain general knowledge about this topic. And then we asked for any additional ideas, what people would like to see, and well, such as you can see it easily, more easily. I'm just going to scroll through it. I find this one, guidance regarding advocacy versus lobbying. Don't know if we could go there with a training module, but I hear you on that one. But anyway, so these are the topics, and if anybody has any questions or concerns, please let me know. We will continue the discussions with where's now CIRCOM, the Center for Mobility, Small Urban Rural Center on Mobility, CIRCOM, and hopefully we'll come up with some sort of, I guess, outline that would demonstrate what the next. Before we can talk about, we can come up with an outline, determine what we'd like to see in the next version. Are there questions?
Richard, is it fair to say that we're looking for volunteers from the steering committee to help lead this effort? And then
Why,
other
yes.
volunteers?
Why?
I may not be able to read your screen, but I can read your mind. There you go. We need help.
I couldn't have asked a better question myself. Why we are. We are definitely looking, and we actually, to do this, one of the items that was brought up in my discussion with Rob Lynch at CIRCOM was there will be a need for steering committee members to sign up to be review panelists. So from whatever we participate in this process, because the first one, we had like 3 or 4 MTAP steering committee members participate, and we'll need sort of the same thing. So you all saw my email from the steering committee about this. Please let me know if you're interested in participating or else. Okay. All right. Moving on. We're an hour and a half in. I thought, unfortunately, since Charles is still not on, I'll just go through a quick research update. In April, the AASHTO Research and Innovation Committee will be meeting on April 14th and 15th to discuss the funding of NCHRP research for fiscal year 2022. They allocate somewhere in the $30 million to $35 million range for research projects. We ranked ours this year, and I think we'll have a pretty good shot at getting them. Our #1 ranked project was sustaining a zero-fare public transportation program in a post-COVID world that was drafted by a problem statement submitted by Virginia DRPT, and the request is for $300,000. Right behind that, another one by Virginia DRPT and Wisconsin DOT, sort of jointly written, benefits analysis of private health sector investments in public/human transportation, also a request for $300,000. The third was written actually by UC Berkeley and submitted by Dave Harris of New Mexico DOT, planning for innovative and emerging mobility futures at intermodal passenger facilities. That's a total request of $450,000, but 2 other programs are going to be contributing to this research proposal, TCRP at $100,000 and ACRP at $150,000, leaving the request for NCHRP at $250,000. And last but not least, return on investment and economic impact of travel demand management programs, again written by Virginia DRPT, at a request for $275,000. So those are our top 4 in order with the funding, and you could be assured we will be involved in those meetings next month, and unfortunately I can't call it advocating for, but strongly encouraging members to support our requests. Generally speaking, we've gotten somewhere between $750,000 to $800,000 annually, at least since we stopped doing the 2065 program. Are there questions? Hearing none and seeing none in the chat, I will just quickly pivot to other ideas and announcements. And the last announcement I have is everyone should know that the steering committee meeting for April has to be changed. It's usually the second Tuesday at 2 o'clock of every month. We're going to have to shift the meeting because I have a meeting that's conflicting me out of the 2 p.m. time slot, 2 p.m. Eastern, by the way. So the next meeting will be on Wednesday, April 14th at 2 p.m. I will send out around the calendar invite for that. But please mark the calendar. Other than that, that's all I got.
I know I have to run to my next thing, so thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate you, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye.
Thanks for staying on.
Thank you.